You have not been listening hard enough. Today on your Money Matters show on Better Bangla, we are gonna be talking about your money. But obviously, I'll give you more. I'll give you tips. I'll give you topics that you probably haven't heard for a very long time or never before. But what do we have for you on your Money Matters show? Yep, we have, of course, tips of the week. I'm not sure if you've been following today the news. We had an airline going bust. So the question is, when an airline goes bust, what is your right when it comes to money? And of course, we will also be talking about serious topic when it comes to bankruptcy, insolvency, debt relief order. So really the world of bankrupt. So what are your options when it comes to insolvency and option if you are an individual thinking about formally writing off your debt? So yes, big topic. So first is your tips of the week, and then first half of is going to be the major topics. We are going to be talking about insolvency. Yeah, the secret word, insolvency. And on the second half, we will be talking about different types of bank accounts in the world of consumer credit. And of course, going back to mine, tip to you is going to be looking at your second tip. But I'll leave that for later. Let's move on to our tips of the week, number uno. Yes, so the question is, when an airline goes bust, and you have heard probably this morning that a lot of people are angry, pissed off, annoyed, left in an airport, not knowing where to go. So when you have a scenario like that, what right do you have? So this is going to be my tip for today. So first, the most important thing is, are you, if you a traveler, are you ATOL protected? And of course, when it comes to ATOL protection, what does it mean? Basically means that when something goes wrong, you're guaranteed a refund if a company collapses, and you found an alternative flight home if you're stranded abroad. But of course, it boils down to a number of things. First, did you book your flight with a travel agent? Now, under ATOL ATOL scheme applies if you booked a package holiday that includes a flight. When you book a holiday booking, make sure your travel company has a license. Firms must display their ATOL license number on websites and brochures. That's when you booked with a travel agent. But what happens when you booked it direct? If you booked your flight and then book hotel accommodation through an airline's website, this may not be covered unless it's a link travel agent. So find out if it's a link travel agent. However, if the airline has gone bust before you depart, you need to contact your travel agent to make sure your booking is still in place. So now let's go delve into if you're abroad when the airline goes bust. Yes, if you have an ATOL protection, you're guaranteed a refund if an airline collapses and must be found an alternative flight if you're stranded, stuck abroad, at no further cost to you. You need to contact your travel agent, by the way, straight away for that. If you are abroad without ATOL protection, in most cases, you need to book flights back with another alternative airline and pay for it yourself. So then, in some cases, however, this can play out differently. For example, the UK government footed the bill for the first 2 weeks when Monarch went bust. You know that Monarch airline? Yeah, that's the one. But, some airlines offer reduced repatriation fares for stranded passengers. These are usually available by telephone only within a few hours, an airline going bust, and lasts for around 2 weeks. So you need to keep an eye. Yes. However, what if it is a linked travel arrangement? Now, if you have a linked travel arrangement, you will benefit from insolvency protection. That means your airline goes bust, you'll get your money back, but you may not qualify for any assistance if you're already abroad. However, the rule only applies to holiday packages sold or offered for sale in the UK since July 2018. However, what if you don't have ATL protection? So in the past, we talked about ATL protection. Now you don't. So what do you have? So in other words, ATL protection where the provider doesn't have a license. So then you have to fall back on other rights. In your case, it's of course going against your credit card company if you've bought your holiday with a credit card company. Now, this is when you flag up Section 75 of the Consumer Credit Act. You have to be eligible. You need to have paid more than £100 for your flight or holiday and used your credit card to book direct with your tour operator or, in fact, airline. And some credit card companies will have a refund event if you paid via a travel agent and it's the agent name listed on your credit card bill. But if you book a refund flight, the total value must be, of course, £100. Don't forget, again, going through it, Section 75 of the Consumer Credit Act, so you can use that, and that's really important. So basically, instead of you going for, let's say, the flight company, travel agent, airline company, you basically go and for the kill towards your credit card company because they are now jointly and severally liable. Simple as that. You might also want to think about other options like your insurance cover. If you've taken an insurance, see if your travel insurance includes that as well. So that's kind of tip of the week. First is if you have ATOL protection, go for that. Second is, of course, Section 75 of the Consumer Credit Act. Go for that. You go for a credit card company. And third, of course, you might have your travel insurance. Go for that as well. Yeah, so this time we are going to be talking about something very seriously, actually. Things that we are ashamed of talking about, embarrassed of talking about. We feel how we mustn't even talk to my neighbors about me going bankrupt. Shameful. It's like being a convict, like a thief. It's like being, you're nobody because you're thinking about insolvency. You're thinking about going bankrupt. How depressing can it be? But of course, on Your Money Show, I don't think like that, and nor should you. So, if you really are genuinely interested in thinking about formally write your debt off and you are an individual, you better listen to this because I will be going through 3 insolvency options. Now, I really talk about these: bankruptcy, debt relief order, individual voluntary arrangement. But if you have gone bankrupt, you need to listen to this. If you're thinking of going bankrupt, you need to listen to this because I'm going to be talking about things that you rarely get to hear about it on TV, on radio, and that is insolvency. Now, before I talk about insolvency issues, I think it's worth knowing some words. Debtors. You call debtors when person owes you money. Bankruptcy basically means a process an individual goes for bankruptcy. And we have discharge when you're released from liability granted to a bankrupt. Usually lasts 12 months, but it could be more depending upon the restrictions placed upon you by the restrictions order. And a couple of other words like statutory demand is a formal notice requiring payment of a debt within 21 days in default may lead your creditor to apply for petition for bankruptcy. You have also another term, unsecured creditor, and strictly speaking, any creditor who does not hold security over your, such as property or assets, you would call them unsecured creditor, and we'll talk about other things as we go on, but those are some of few things that I would like you to be familiar at first in terms of wording. So really the question for me, is what types of insolvency are they in order for you to explore. But of course, if you're a consumer, fundamentally there are three. One is bankruptcy, which we'll go through it later. This can obviously only apply to individuals, as we said earlier. Bankruptcy petition may be presented to the court by the individual, in fact, by creditors who are owed $750 or more, or by the supervisor on an individual voluntary arrangement. That's basically a person who's running your show for an individual voluntary arrangement, and he or she makes a petition for you to go bankrupt. A bankruptcy order is made ultimately not by you, not by me, not by anybody except the court. So therefore the court makes a declaration that you go bankrupt. So that's in a sense of bankruptcy. Now, what is insolvency? An individual comes to an arrangement with creditors, i.e. loan company, credit card company, and any other companies and organization who are party to arrangement. And what you do, and you pay to creditors debts in part, or and it is an alternative to bankruptcy, and it is arranged with creditors and arranged by a licensed insolvency practitioner. So you can't have anyone doing it. You can't have me doing it. Yes, I might be a debt expert, but I'm not the person who is qualified to talk about insolvency. I'm sorry, to kind of set up an arrangement for individual voluntary arrangement. If the proposal accepted, so in other words, the insolvency practitioner has to offer to creditors, and if most of them agrees to the offer and the agreement, then of course it will become legally binding. In the meantime, the court, an interim order is sometimes issued by a court and will immediately protect the debtor from any legal action by creditors. But there are other ones in the context, of course, and let me just go through it. And it's important actually, and that is a debt relief order. And a debt relief order is quite similar to bankruptcy, except that your debt is smaller and administered by a debt relief order intermediary, and the criteria is primarily the same, except that a debt relief order intermediary will execute your order for mini bankruptcy. So so that's kind of like basic summary of it. But of course, let's look at the overview of individual insolvency processes. Yeah, so let's go for our debt relief order first. Let's look at the criteria for debt relief order. obviously. And debt relief order is really, again, very much similar to bankruptcy as well. I would say similar, whereby you will think about not being able to pay your debt. Obviously, that's a criteria. And you can't afford to pay, and you have about £90. Sorry, it costs £90. So it's a cheaper option than, let's say, any other. And you have your assets can't be less than £1,000. If you have a car, the value of the car can't be anything more. And of course, debt relief order intermediary has to assess your income, assess your expenses, assess your disposal income, and then if you meet the conditions and criteria, it's a debt relief order intermediary who will have to execute and make an application to court for debt relief order. And if you are then successful, you will have to meet a number of, obviously, what you call restrictions. And once you've fulfilled the restrictions, you can then be discharged from debt relief order, and then should be able to live a normal life. But let's talk about some of the restrictions. And some of these restrictions will also apply if you want to go bankrupt. But let me just briefly go through these restrictions. You mustn't, for example, you can't obviously act as a director of a company or form, manage, or promote a company without permission from the court. So you need permission from the court to even think about, even contemplating in becoming a director of a company. For example, if you carry out a business, you must not carry on business under a different name without telling people you do business with the name or in which the DRO was made. So you don't deceive, don't lie. You've done what you've done. You better let everyone know that you are now your debt has been written off. Now, if you think of borrowing more than £500 without saying that you are subject to restrictions, so in other words, never ever try borrowing more than 500 without saying that you have been subjected to restrictions. So you better do what needs doing. And of course, you can't be a trustee of a charity because you need to appear to be fair. You need to appear to have a good character. Clearly, having a debt relief order doesn't shine that great light upon you. So that's kind of debt relief order. Now, in terms of going bankrupt, how does that work then? Now, bankruptcy rule is quite similar. Again, your debt, it has to be more than 20. If your debt is less than 20, you may have to think about, obviously, debt relief order. But you can't afford to pay off your debt. Usually it's loans, credit cards, and other things. Now, anything could be included as part of bankruptcy. You know, if you want to include your mortgage, you could do that, except that the mortgage will be taken away by the lender, so you won't have control over it. I've come across cases where individuals went bankrupt and then the mortgage lender is chasing the property. That happened because they've secured the property anyway. But, and you can't afford to pay. The rule is quite similar to debt relief order, except that your debt is more than £20,000. Yes, £20,000. You can include rent arrears. One more thing. Just like debt relief order and bankruptcy, student loan is you may add it, but you won't get written off. Court fines like criminal offences and debt related to magistrate court and crown court, you cannot remove them. It will be still included and it will stay with you. And also, of course, social funds that you take from the government, they will also deduct money from that. Any proceed of crime will also stick with you. There's a couple more, but of course, if you are thinking of going bankrupt, I suggest you seek advice. Yeah, but that's that. Who then, of course, don't forget, you will still be bound by restrictions. restrictions are, it's quite similar to the same as bankruptcy. Sorry, debt relief order. You can't be a director, and you can't form or manage or promote a company without permission from the court. Carry a business under a different name without telling people you do business with the name. And if you try to borrow again, you have to say that you are subject to restrictions and you can't be a trustee. Now, here's one more thing. If you work in various posts in education, such as being a school governor, you can't be a governor, because being a governor or being an accountant, and in fact, that also includes with debt relief order, you might not be, because you're not fit for purpose. You're not fit to be a governor, I suppose. Now, with the cost is a big one. It costs $680 to go bankrupt, and if you look at with debt relief order, it costs £90. You don't have to pay all the money all at once, but once you've paid full, you can then make you can then submit your application. Now, how do you make? And by the way, your bank accounts may be frozen, so you better take advice from your banks, how they will behave in terms of you going bankrupt. They might have their own policies. Some banks have their policy, and they'll say, if you're bankrupt, you can't use this bank account or that bank account. You won't be able to use all your credit cards and loans and stuff. You need to find out, talk to them. So now, I know we've covered debt relief order. We've covered the process of bankruptcy. But how do you make an application for bankruptcy? Now, these days, things are becoming quite easy. You can actually go online and do it. So go online, Google bankruptcy application, and then you just fill in your name and your address details, and then you create an account. You then get an email in your email stating your reference number, and you use that reference number to complete your application for bankruptcy. Yes, bankruptcy. So they will be asking you lots of questions. Think about it. You are thinking of writing off all of your debt, and you're thinking of getting away with it? You must be kidding. So what they will ask you is basic stuff at first, your personal details, name, date of birth, how many children you've got, how many houses have you got, and how much you're earning. So first thing they'll talk about is your personal details. That's kind of obvious once you log on. Then they'll ask you about your employment details. Are you working? Are you studying? What are you doing? What's going on in your life? How you're earning? Then they'll ask you about your bank accounts and your savings. Do you have bank account? So you need to list every single one of them. And creditors need to know. And, of course, the government needs to know. The insolvency service needs to know to execute and also notify them that you gone bankrupt. So, and then they'll ask you about your assets. Do you have anything of value? Now, they're especially interested in things that you may have sold in the last 3 years. So if you've been estranged and sold in the last 3 years, they need to know. If you don't tell them, you will realize that they will come back to bite you and will say something like, you've lied to us, therefore bankruptcy order is no longer available because you lied. And they might even prosecute you for lying, because there is bankruptcy related criminal offense where you lied to obtain benefit, and they'll come back to you and they'll prosecute you for lying, basically. So they'll ask you about the money that you owe, so you have to list the money that you owe. They'll ask you for your details of your account number, sort code, loan reference. If it's about paying overpayment of benefits, you need to write down a list of all the reference numbers so they can trace all those things. And of course, then they'll ask you about your income. This is where you outline your income. If you're getting working tax credit, child tax credit, job seekers allowance, employment support allowance, a personal independence payment, you mention about those things. And then they'll also talk about the money that you spend and how you spend. This is where you'll be outlining those things. And of course, if the official receiver thinks that you are spending unwisely, they will no doubt come back and ask you for explanation. Now, the application online also talks about your debt history, i.e., at what point did you get into debt? What was your reason for getting into debt? And have you been insolvent in the past? And you have to explain why. And also, what have you done? Have you made any extra payments to some creditors but not others? To make sure that you have not given preferential treatment over one creditor over another in the last 2 years. They want to know, because your responsibility is to treat all creditors fairly, but also the courts also have the responsibility to make sure all creditors are treated fairly. So it's about fairness of it all. And of course, then you sign it, and then you submit your application. So, and then what you happen once you've done that, there are restrictions that I went through before. Obviously, you need to abide by these restrictions. And if there is your change of circumstance, you're going to have to mention that mention ASAP during the period when you're before you get discharged. Because it might mean that the bankruptcy restriction order get varied. So yeah, to income payments order or anything else. So you need to bear that in mind. So that's kind of both, I suppose, bankruptcy and debt relief order. But briefly, let me just talk about individual voluntary arrangement, because it is also an insolvency process where you pay not all but part. I won't talk too much about it, but the thing that you need to bear in mind is with this one, you do have to have an insolvency practitioner supporting you and negotiating on your behalf. So there is a cost for insolvency practitioner, and from my understanding, on average, it costs about £1,000. But the agreement, the voluntary agreement, will include those things, and it is legally binding. You need to bear that in mind, and so long you have disposable income, you're bound by the terms of the individual voluntary arrangement. And of course, if you don't comply with it, then you may find that the creditors may apply for bankruptcy. Insolvency practitioner may apply for bankruptcy, or you yourself can make a petition for bankruptcy. And of course, we earlier on talked briefly about bankruptcy. Yes, all the things, including bankruptcy, DRO, and IVA, it will stay on your credit file for up to 6 years. And of course, this no doubt will have negative impact on your credit rating. But to be honest, if you're thinking of bankruptcy, debt relief order, IVA, it's very likely your credit rating is already bad. So it's not about just simply worried about how pretty is my record on file, but it really is about how much you're struggling to pay your debt. So that's what it's all about, really. So yes, we have covered this half of the show, insolvency processes, and I hope you've learned a couple of things. But let me just take a few minutes break and get back to you to talk about different types of banks and my other tip.
ট্রাভেলসের জগতে সকলের পরিচিত ও অত্যন্ত জনপ্রিয় একটি নাম ইনসাইড ট্রাভেল। চায়না, আফ্রিকা, আমেরিকা কিংবা মিডল ইস্ট সহ বিশ্বের যে কোনো দেশের এয়ার টিকিটই এখানে সুলভ মূল্যে পাওয়া যায়। বাংলাদেশ বিমানের